The Wuhan supervirus outbreak is preparing to explode like an atomic bomb in every major city of the world. It's been weaponized like anthrax. The virus particles repel each other, disperse into a cloud, and stick onto surfaces like static cling. It's been weaponized. People are about to be infected by a military virus from China, and they don't even know it. Most of the sheeple are unprepared for what's coming. It's rather sad to see. Even yesterday, with the ghost ship arriving on Jersey Shore, you had paramedics show up without, the proper gear, and it's like, what planet are they from? Ladies and gentlemen, we've got the latest footage, the latest statistics, the latest numbers, the latest cases that are surfacing in the news. Of course, the situation is much, much worse than what they're representing on television. They don't want the system to collapse, so they're just trying to lullaby people into thinking that it's okay. And it shows, because many of the sheeple that you talk to out there haven't the slightest clue of what's happening in China and what's about to hit America. You can call it a weaponized flu, but it's more like airborne AIDS, and it can infect like pink eye. You got airborne pink eye that can infect you and kill you. That's how notorious this weapon is. And of course, when they were brewing this in a lab, they were thinking of, modern containment policies and Western civilization. This thing will spread, will contaminate just about every town in America. Millions are expected to be killed, and there really isn't a whole lot of, positive, to report when it comes to this virus, except that it's going to be taking out Sodom and Gomorrah. It's going to be taking out the big cities and the like, ladies and gentlemen. And right now we're telling people to prepare. It seems like, outbreaks may begin to happen within 72 hours to 2 weeks. There's really just too many variables in play to tell for sure. But we're already starting to see countries like Japan, South Korea, and Malaysia melt down right now as we speak. They're already reporting third-degree infections. And so people just don't even know how they're getting infected, and these cases aren't linked to the import cases. We got super spreaders everywhere, but this virus is made to super spread. Every person that gets it is going to be a super spreader, and most of the people won't even know that they've been infected. But we'll start seeing people drop dead on American streets within weeks, and that's just going to be the beginning of the crisis. But right now, if the epicenter, Wuhan, China, is ground zero, if that is the zero time zone, right now, neighboring countries, again, South Korea, Japan, Malaysia, are in time zone 1. They're already beginning to melt down. They've got uncontrolled spread of this virus, ladies and gentlemen. And how do you think, the virus got there? With the planes. And so if these countries are starting to melt down, major countries in America, or major cities in America, can't be far behind, because they got the same kind of payload as everybody else. These people didn't swim to Japan, they took the plane. And there's probably more going to Japan than San Francisco, but it only takes one. And this is a weaponized strain. It's made to spread. Even one is way too many. And this virus has had a 3-week head start since the beginning. So we're advising people to, put in place self-isolation in about 72 hours. And it could be more depending on, how far away you are from a big city. But every road will take you there. And it's just like, a matter of time before this reaches your town. And there won't be a notification at the grocery store, Wuhan is here. And by the time they report the first cases on the news, it's too late. This thing is set up to explode like an atomic bomb. And before, people actually show up at the ICU, 2 or 3 weeks has gone by at least. And by then, this thing is replicated so many times. It's had, so many series that it's pretty much everywhere, uncontainable, and every person that becomes infected is a time bomb. We've got some real interesting graphics as far as case studies are concerned, from the onset of symptoms and when they're hospitalized. And this is a real intense graphic. The black lines are less than a week, orange lines are more than a week, and these are the dates from the 1st of January to the end of January. And each line is a case. And so you get to see how long it takes before they start coughing and the time it takes for them to end up in the hospital. And usually we're looking at about a week from the first symptoms. And they get infected 2 or 3 days before that, at least. And so, there's a huge lag time here. And there's enough diversity in the cases that, it's never just going to burn out after a couple series. You got people that are going to be holding on to this virus for up to 14, 21 days, shedding it, and before anybody really knows better. So there's a wide enough spectrum of incubation that it becomes just about impossible to typify. Now, you also have to kind of put this into perspective. Most of the people that are dropping dead are the ones with like diabetes or other types of pre-existing conditions. 1 in 2 Americans has diabetes. 1 in 2 Americans is on meds. So how many people are going to drop dead in American cities is the question. And there's probably a lot of people that are holding out hope for various reasons, that because we're not all crammed into little Agenda 21 apartments, that will be okay. This thing is made to super spread, to cling, and we're getting reports that it survives up to 5 days until we get undeniable proof that that is not the case. You could be getting things through the mail. Somebody in New York sends you a letter and they're contaminated. For 5 days, you're going to have virus particles on it, and people aren't even going to know where they got it. This is like weaponized anthrax. The way this virus has been engineered, it's made to repel each other. All the particles are made to repel and disperse like perfume, and it's just going to cling on to everything. And that makes this virus, a super killer, a super spreader all by itself. You can't even imagine. This is a weaponized strain that's meant to propagate and work around conventional containment. And what we're seeing is that even when they've isolated people into apartment buildings, they're now having to weld the doors shut. And it's just like what they're doing out there is like beyond anything that we can expect done in America. And that means that the outbreak is going to be much worse. We're never going to, do what they've done. They're starting to round up people and throw them into virus camps, just for being suspected. No trial, no jury, no due process. You're just gone. People, kicking and screaming, thrown in a box, and, never to be seen again for the most part. If they didn't have the virus before the camp, they're certainly going to get the virus after the camp. They're not isolation wards. They're just like big gymnasiums with like 100 or 1,000 people in them, with poor sanitation. So, it's just a catastrophe. They say that they're containing it, but we see the videos and it's, it doesn't look contained. And, again, they're welding the doors shut. And we've played that video at the beginning, numerous clips, and maybe we'll come back to it, ladies and gentlemen, but numerous clips where they're welding the doors shut. And again, they're just going to extraordinary lengths that nobody else would go to try and contain this virus. So that means it's going to be worse. And, there's quite a bit you could say about this being a calculated release. They know that they're going to take a hit, but they know that it's going to be worse in other countries because they're not going to be willing to do what it takes to try to bring the R naught to zero. That's a real interesting term, the R naught, the R0 factor. and it basically needs to get to a certain level before it'll burn out. And so they're tapping on the brakes by locking everything down in ways you can't even imagine. And it's still not enough. And there's no telling how deadly this virus is, except that it's much worse than what they're saying. And we've seen all sorts of videos of these interesting trucks going by, spraying this mysterious mist. You know, what's really happening under the cover of this outbreak? What are they really spraying? And, you know, are they rounding up truthers and, you know, journalists out there under the cover of this outbreak? You know, non-party members, if you will, to basically do away with dissidents. It's starting to look more like a genocide than an outbreak. And, you know, we can expect much of the same over here. There's no telling what kind of YouTubers and the like are going to disappear under the cover of this outbreak. And it just takes, you know, a concerned citizen to call and say, you've got a cough or a fever, and here comes the brigade, if you will. So this is a very dangerous and unprecedented situation that's bound to get much worse before it gets any better out there. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got some new footage of these trucks going by, spraying their chemtrails, if you will. But nobody dares call them chemtrails. Nobody dares call it a conspiracy anymore. You know, when the WikiLeaks came out linking all the politicians and the celebrities to, you know, dark occult practices, people laughed at it. Then the Epstein case went down. They killed Epstein. People aren't laughing anymore. You shouldn't be laughing at what people have been talking about since 9/11, because it's tyranny, ladies and gentlemen. And, you know, they certainly weren't planning to stop with 9/11. And there's been, you know, numerous Gladio B events since, countless people killed, endless wars, and now there's this Resident Evil bioweapon outbreak. And you can bet that, you know, people on both sides of the Pacific are working together in this endeavor to exterminate as many people as they can get away with. And our intel tells us that this outbreak was concluded during the latest Chinese-American trade talks, phase 1, if you remember. It didn't get a whole lot of attention, but there was a deal, and this was part of the deal. And you know, this is why they're just letting, you know, all of these cases in. You know, whether it be the ghost ship yesterday or the countless flights that have flown in, you know, since and the like. I mean, this has been done on purpose, and they pay more attention. You know, the television pays more attention to a hurricane coming in than it does with this outbreak. You know, when a hurricane comes in, they got reporters everywhere in every city and every place. You got, you know, nonstop coverage, even in the regular news, latest numbers and the like. You got the countdown, the works, you know, but you're not getting that here. Instead, you're getting like the silent treatment. See how nifty that is? They bring the incinerator box with them. They just dump you in the incinerator box, and then out you go to the crematorium. You just couldn't make this stuff up. People should check out the movie or the History Channel documentary, Hitler and the Occult. You know, you've just got to beware of these people, ladies and gentlemen, to say the least. Because when cult members are in charge, it always turns out the same. It's tyranny. It's FEMA camps, concentration camps, and the like, but in the modern day. And instead of bringing people to the gas chamber, they've brought the gas chamber to the people. They're not using Zyklon B, they're using Zyklon C for coronavirus. And it's happening right now. It's beginning. And the countdown is on before we're seeing scenes like this in America. And you'd think that they would be more prepared. But as far as we can tell, they're just, you know, going to go to their underground bases and let everybody just kind of, you know, fend for themselves. Again, there's no telling how devastating this virus will be, but it is a weapon, ladies and gentlemen. So it's like a machine gun, not a vaccine. And so this isn't going to end well anytime soon, and we expect, you know, quite a bit of collateral damage, world economies collapsing like the Great Depression, I mean, just out of the blue, just like that, 2020, ladies and gentlemen. We've got new cases to report. Major outbreak in France. 5 new cases at a mountain resort near Chamonix. And the name of the town is called Contaminé, which means contaminated. You just couldn't make this stuff up. Literally, check it out. When I saw that, I snickered a little bit. I was like, how poetic. It shows up in a town called Contaminated. And, what else can you say? But it was a British guy that had been to Singapore, and he traveled everywhere, super spreading it everywhere. And he'd been, hanging out at this, mountain cabin for at least a week. And he's infected the neighbors. The schools are being shut down because it looks like they sent kids to school, and everybody's infected. And there's probably a bunch more cases, waiting to show up just from that one dude. And there's another, traveler from Singapore, another Brit that was, hauled in recently. And that guy infected countless people as well. They're trying to track everybody down. And there's no telling how many different, cases there are like this. But again, this is coming from time zone number 1 of the outbreak. That ring around China of neighboring countries, Malaysia, Japan, South Korea. They're all melting down right now. They're going through the China syndrome, and they've got perhaps days or maybe a week or two before a full lockdown, before it's just like China. And you have to remember the timeline here. China went from basically 40 cases to hundreds of thousands of cases in a span of 2 months. And they were looking for this kind of thing. They'd gone through the SARS outbreak. That entire region has gone through the SARS outbreak. That's probably why we're seeing more numbers from them, because they already had the kits and, the like. But, those cases, for the most part, traveled by aeroplane. The people that ended up in Japan or South Korea traveled by aeroplane. And that's how they got to America and the UK too. So if they're melting down, we're not far behind. But, we're seeing quite a bit of spread from Singapore, at least 2 major cases that have rocked Western Europe recently from Singapore, not even from China, right? And that was back around the 22nd, 20th. So this thing is spreading quickly. We have days, maybe weeks before, the major outbreak begins. And nobody's ready. And we've been telling people, however, for the last 14 days, prepare, because just the way this thing was going, it was like nothing anyone had ever seen before. Day 1 of the outbreak, we're like, they're locking down everything like it escaped the lab. And then we started finding out, there is a weapons lab in town, and they have a history of coronavirus escaping that lab. You couldn't make that up. And then, so on and so forth, as things, turned for the worse, people dropping dead and the like, the entire country being shut down, we're like, you better prepare, because this is not, the standard flu. And then the microbiologists started discovering inserts like it was a GMO. This is a GMO virus. And they've copied and pasted, various functions into it to weaponize it. And so this is a weapon that was destined to be released in America. That's how they basically kind of thought up this virus. Okay, if we, in the doomsday, kind of scenario, the dead man switch, we have to open up, this little vial, the rabbit's foot. Remember that Mission Impossible movie, the rabbit's foot? Right? They just have to open up this little vial, and nothing can be done. And it'll just kind of like, ramp up in a way that it'll go off like an atomic bomb everywhere. And, they made sure that happened by letting it kind of, incubate in Wuhan the way it did. And you just can't imagine that nobody was aware. Everybody was aware pretty much day 1. And this is part of the plan. Again, we feel confident that this is part of what they agreed to with the first round or the first phase of trade agreements. We're not going to go beyond that, but In any case, this should be treated as a bioweapon and nothing else. The new cases that are coming out are starting to ramp up, especially outside of China. And, we got numerous cruise ships, at least 3 or 4 cruise ships that have been contaminated and have become, major incubators for this virus reservoirs. One virus ship actually landed and dispersed on the East Coast yesterday on Jersey Shore. And it was like nobody could believe it. And unless you understand that this is being done on purpose, it just doesn't make sense. Who would do such a thing? The Japanese, didn't do it. Nobody wants these ghost ships. But, when it came to yesterday's ghost ship that emerged out of the fog at 6 a.m., out of the darkness at 6 a.m., they're like, yeah, come on in. Welcome to America. So, obviously, they want this thing to explode like another 9/11. And then they're going to come in and, save the day, hopefully, eventually, and, be the heroes and the like. But, it should be noted for the record that they could have done so much more trying to stop it now. And we definitely need an explanation for that. Maybe their strategy is, max burnout. That's the best way, just to have this thing go up like a piece of paper, but on fire. You know what I mean? Instead of just like nibbling little by little, lasting forever, So it's hard to say exactly what is going on for sure. Nobody can say with certainty that Trump did it, but I'll tell you what it looks like. It looks just like 9/11. The plane is 20 miles out. The plane is 10 miles out. Do the orders still stand? Of course, the orders still stand. That's what it looks like right now. So we certainly would like to get more information from the White House on, what their perspective is on this current situation. We've heard some kind of press release that, they're now looking to see if this was bioengineered. Of course, they'll come back and say, no, this wasn't bioengineered. What we're seeing, is total evolution. It just came out of the anteater. Speaking of evolution, ladies and gentlemen, many of you are familiar with the Darwinian theory of evolution. But modern day science proves that life can only come from life. That's called the law of biogenesis. And there is no chemical pathway from primordial soup to the simplest living cell. And the reason is because life requires DNA, a programming language. And in fact, this is why we're dealing with a virus. It's trying to hack that programming language. But all life is governed by the program, the code of life. And it's really interesting, ladies and gentlemen, but the whole, what they're selling you in public schools, it's a lie. And, life didn't evolve from, some kind of soup of chemicals. If that was the case, we could do that in a lab. And, even if we could do that one day, the only thing that would prove is that life comes from life. Well, that life comes from life, and that, it takes intelligence to make life. And if you really want more on, what's going on here, ladies and gentlemen, check out the Bible, because it literally is the pages of the Bible playing out before our very eyes. The places that are going to get worse hit by this virus are places like Sodom and Gomorrah, San Francisco, places that are trying to ban Christianity, persecute people of faith, and rewrite the Bible. What we're seeing here is biblical, and there's no telling, what kind of price they've paid. But of course, they don't want people talking about that. They don't want the shame of knowing that they've just suffered the wrath, ladies and gentlemen. But we're going to see that hit San Francisco, Silicon Valley, the West Coast, all these Antifa people, Nazi Pelosi and company, Adam Schill, they're all going to get it. Their districts, are going down. And that might be besides the point, but I think it's worth noting for the record that this is, these are the areas that are going to be affected most. And so, look, reinforcements have arrived, and just in time for the next elections. There'll be a lot less Democrats after this is all done. But we're asking everybody out there to prepare, because, the sheeple ain't going to be tuning in to this broadcast. You people are. You're the demographic that needs to prepare. And this thing is for real. It's coming. And it's got all the warning signs of, a biblical plague. And, there's things going on in Africa right now. The locusts are just, eating up all the crops. There's, earthquakes everywhere, wars, and the like. And it looks like the video guy is on vacation. But it's biblical, man. And so, Christians need to prepare and take their country back. Enough with the Sodom and Gomorrah. If the Jews can have a homeland, the Christians need a homeland too. We need a place where we can raise our kids without this Luciferian ideology trying to groom our kids and the like before it's too late. We're going to leave it there for this broadcast. We'll be back with another one soon. Until the next time, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to this, you are the resistance.